Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ecopunks, where we dissect, explore, and basically try to understand our society from an ecosystem perspective, which essentially means looking everywhere and from everywhere to better understand a situation. And in this case, to better understand an individual, because as we near the end of 2023, I think if people were handing out awards for Idiot of the Year or Clown or Buffoon of the Year, Elon Musk would be a unanimous victor. He sort of started the year with maybe a decent amount of credibility, or even 2 years ago, a well respected entrepreneur and billionaire. And now he seems to just be a laughing stock for
He,
many.
he did have competition at some point, right? Sam Bankman-Fried tried to compete with him violently for Idiot of the Year, but I agree with you, Jesse. Elon is leading the race again, right?
Yeah, you are quite right that it was
Yeah.
a stellar contest between two people who in previous eras I would never have believed that they could attain that power and status. But here we are, where not only can a clown become president of the United States, but a clown can literally be the kind of person of the year that we all pay attention to, in this case for not good reasons. So, Jan, I'm glad that, I think you were partly the provocation for this, because you were sort of talking to me about the New York Times Deal Book Conference, which Mr. Musk recently spoke at. And I have to say, I'm shocked at what transpired, but I would love for you, for our listeners, for people who perhaps were not aware of this total fiasco, what happened? And let me make this a two-parter. I'd love for you to sort of give me your take of what happened at the Deal Book Conference. But why don't you also remind us about what happened at the Code Conference with Linda Yaccarino, who is ostensibly still the CEO of X, Elon Musk's social media company. So if you want to kind of lay both of those events out as a bit of context as to why we're kind of wondering what the F is up with Elon, and what's happening when we start looking forward to 2024.
You're putting a lot of weight on my shoulders here, Jesse, but let me try and do my best. First of all, you brought up Donald Trump, which was actually my plan to do at a later stage, because both Elon and Donald I'd rather not talk about, but I'm afraid we have to, and that's why we have our conversation here today. So maybe I approach this in chronological order, starting with the Code Conference, right? At which Linda Yaccarino, the CEO of Twitter, was basically on stage, was interviewed, and was confronted with a statement that the owner of the platform, Elon Musk, had made. To her big surprise, she had never heard of it. And it was, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something that was likely suitable to annoy advertisers that were not on a good foot with the platform to begin with, even further. And Linda, to give her credit, right, who's coming from NBC, where she led advertising sales, has a really, really good relationship with the advertising space. So those are her contacts that are being burned. But even worse so, she wasn't even aware that Elon had said that, and then was stumbling and was very, very awkward. In German, we say Fremdschämen to the emotion that I felt when I saw that, meaning being ashamed and embarrassed on behalf of others. So that was already really, really weird. And then, there was the Deal Book Conference, Andrew Ross Sorkin's New York Times Festival of the Business, of the American business, I should say, hosted in New York last week. And I think Linda Yaccarino was in the audience. Unfortunately, Elon Musk was on stage. And he basically told everyone that Twitter as a platform would most likely go bankrupt, and that the advertisers who are not spending money are to blame.
Although here's where I
Yeah.
think it's important to establish tone. I couldn't tell if he was being serious. Like, it was not clear to me that his remarks throughout his I shouldn't say presentation, because it was an interview, it was a conversation. But
it was a presentation. No, you are right. It was not a conversation. It was a presentation. It was a performance. I'll come to the tone in a second because, there were other things that he said. Let me start with the pure facts here, right? So he then, in an absurd turn of events, in a Trumpian way, openly at a media event, last speaker of the entire week, right, of the entire day, says on stage that whoever is not spending money on Twitter should go and fuck themselves. And then he also calls up Bob Iger from Disney, who had spoken there before. And, that was a moment where, you could go, oh, there he goes again. It's just Elon, right? But no, that's not the way you should go there, because that's the thing that people have gotten or let Donald Trump get away with as well, right? Donald Trump, I'll never forget when he said on tape that whenever he sees a woman, he grabs them, by her genitals. I thought that's it. That was the final nail at his coffin. And he still got elected, right? So,
and let me just pause you there, because there's two things you said I want to quickly hot pursue. One is, I think that recording you described, grab her by the pee, was a turning point, not just in his campaign, but would later become his presidency, because that's when it was clear that whatever the traditional media throws at him is not going to stick. The things that would have disqualified any other candidate in political history does not apply to this guy. And that's why my second point, I'm kind of hesitant to use the word facts when talking about these two individuals, because they transcend facts. And that's why I agree with you. It was a performance, and I am still puzzling why he got into this. But please continue, because there were other dynamics of this that I think you want to bring to our attention.
So with regards to that recording in the bus of Donald Trump, I agree with you. I'd go even one step further. I'd say the fact that this happened and he still got elected with a huge share of the female population, right, was a turning point in society, because it basically has proven to everyone that you can cross the unthinkable lines and still get president of the United States. And I think
I would go further and say he won because he crossed those lines.
Possibly, because he enraged his voters sufficiently. You're probably right there. But I think what we see here is also that Elon Musk crosses all thinkable lines and no one cares, right? What has happened? Where did manners end? And, you spoke about the tone and the whole demeanor. It was strange. He said things, as if he belonged to, an alien species. He at one point was telling Andrew Ross Sorkin, tell this to Earth, right? He wasn't quite there. It was weird. It was really, really, really weird. But you know what, Jesse? I think nothing is going to change.
I disagree. And here's why. I think he's a clown, but I don't think he's dumb. I think he's an idiot, but I think he's also very smart and very calculating and has a lot of resources. And I think on the one hand, he was nervous, right? Like the one of the things we know about Elon is he wishes he were a comedian. He aspires to the power that comedians command on stage.
He likes to surround himself with
them. And I think part of what we witnessed was a failed set. Like, he bombed, right? He tried to make some jokes and they fell flat on an audience that doesn't really like the guy. But I think that there was some, and especially to your point about his use of the word Earth, right? I don't think he was using the word Earth casually. I agree it made him come across as a being from another planet. And of course, this is the guy who keeps saying we need to colonize Mars, in order to escape climate change. But I think he was calling to a kind of commons, right? A kind of people, the way, a dictator would call to the Romans, like the people out in the street. And I think that was part of why he has X and Twitter, right? That it is his way of feeling like he has a crowd, he has a following, he has a cult that he can call to to be able to defend him. And his point about being bankrupt by advertisers who are leaving him and blaming him was, on the one hand, the typical display of his narcissism, right? That it's everyone else but him, right? That everyone else is the problem, and he's the one trying to save things. But here's where I don't think that this is the end of the story, and why I don't think that this will have no impact, or that, because you made another, let me just emphasize, you made another, I think, brilliant argument that Elon Musk is riding on the coattails of Mr. Trump. That Trump blazed this trail of irreverence, of profanity, of doing whatever you want and defying all conventions, and people absolutely loved it. And Musk is now doing it and courting the same crowd, and the same mainstream media is going, oh man, these, like, what do we do with these people? Like, they're just idiots. But I think this is Musk playing for the far right. I think he has in his calculations decided that the far right is winning, that they're gonna win. And this is Mr. pro-apartheid South Africa saying, well, I know which side I'm gonna be on. And he's modified his rhetoric because he's anticipating what's going to happen in 2024, right? He's anticipating how, you wrote a great article for our Gazette about the Dutch election, right? And we also threw in the Argentina election. Maybe Musk is, especially this was after meeting Netanyahu, who is pretty far right, that he's just deciding the political climate in 2024 leans hard right. And he's a trendsetter, so he's leading harder right before any of them do. And thus his audience was not the New York Times or the people at a New York Times event, but people who are watching from elsewhere, hence his Earth evocation.
Yeah. My rather pessimistic comment with regards to I don't think anything is going to change about him was also motivated a little bit by this really weird PR redemption tour that he did, and because I was sitting here in disbelief, right? As a German in New York, I see what he basically tweeted about, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this must be the end. Next thing I see is I turn the TV on and he's sitting there with President Netanyahu, and I'm thinking, who gives him even the time of the day here, right? I just insulted your people, and now I'm having coffee and cookies with you. How's that even possible?
But this is why he's kind of a stooge, because I'm not convinced. This was the same argument I originally had for Trump, and I kind of don't apply it to Trump anymore. But I wonder, and this is the question: is he an ideologue or is he an opportunist? Right? Does he really believe in these ideas, or is he just playing to a rabid crowd that is the most worked up, and from an internet perspective, really energize algorithms? Like, these people trend topics, these people, like, if the advertisers are abandoning X, then maybe the nut jobs and the right-wing crazies are its salvation. And if he can attract them and make them think that this is the platform of freedom of speech, then, and that's where Netanyahu saw Musk as easy propaganda. Like, on the one hand, he's like, oh, look at this clown saying this stuff, but I bet I could pressure him to come here and be a propaganda expert, which he was. Like, Musk looked like an idiot, but Netanyahu looked like a statesman, whereas Netanyahu is a war criminal. And anything Netanyahu can do to not be seen as a war criminal, i.e. someone who talks to CEOs, then it benefits Netanyahu.
See, and I don't think that Netanyahu looked like a statesman. Biden not inviting Musk to this whatever summit he just is holding, that is being a statesman, right? Not talking about it, but just leaving out the invite to the bully. That is doing the right thing here. But I want to quickly go back to something else that you said. You mentioned Musk's fable for comedians, right? And I think that is a really, really interesting point. If you look at his performance at the Dealbook conference and compare that with Will Smith's freak out at the, what was it, Emmys, or Oscars, where he walked on stage and slapped the guy into the face.
Yeah.
I see a
Get the name of
similarity.
your wife out of my mouth, out of your mouth.
Yeah. I see a similarity here in, with regards to causing outrage, and that is being performed by a guy who basically tried to dominate the tabloids with a fake, ring fight with Mark Zuckerberg. Right, someone, we spoke about Trump earlier. Trump was having a TV show and then became president of the United States, right? Musk is an entrepreneur turned what? Visiting President Netanyahu during the war, trying to fight, being an athlete. What is that even, right? So
Well,
I think it's also a test of our times, a testament of our times, how the lines are so blurry. No wonder the guy is confused.
now, if we were a conspiracy podcast, which we're not, we would
Thank God.
focus on NBC Universal as the link. Because of
Mm.
course they hosted The Apprentice, right? The same way that Linda is now helping X. But no, I'm making that as a joke.
Linda, it's all about Linda.
Yeah,
she was the mastermind.
I'm making that as a joke, but I think the point that you're making, which is quite profound, is the way in which mythology has taken over our contemporary narrative.
Yeah.
I did a gig yesterday where I started and I gave this little bit about myths versus science. And I sort of said they're not oppositional, right? Society has a role for both, the way society has a role for politics and religion. And similarly, I'm religion should be focused more on science in a contemporary society than mythology. But we now live in a society where mythologies are the more dominant stories because it's easier for someone to make up a story than it is to prove one that is correct. It's more entertaining, it's more sensational, it's more likely to be shared across social media platforms. So in both Trump and Musk, we have people who are, and I say this with both mockery and admiration, they are masters of mythology, right? Both of their careers are based on mythology, not reality. Their brands are based on mythology, not reality. And their politics, and this is what I meant by opportunistic, I think they just say whatever they can to get attention, right? I think, your point about Musk versus Zuckerberg in the octagon, right? That's just Musk seeing an opportunity to get people giving him attention and writing stuff about him. But I think when it comes down to, for example, the myth of Tesla, we may be seeing these myths start to unravel. Because the other interesting news piece that we should throw into our discussion is, of course, the Cybertruck and the unveiling of the Cybertruck. And I follow this only because, Jeanette really wants an electric truck. She hates the fossil fuel industry so much that she would love to replace our Ford F-150 with an EV. But the Cybertruck's a complete disaster. Like, on technical specs, if you're a nerd who knows nothing, you might think it's really cool. But it took way longer to produce. It had huge cost overruns, right? And it's going to have all sorts of problems moving forward. So I kind of feel that these are people who have built their entire careers on myth. And now we're reaching a point where their myths are less and less effective. Where does that leave them? And I think that's why I'm not saying that they will diminish, but I am saying I think things are changing as we move forward into 2023.
Yep, myth, and as you were talking about it, I was thinking borrowed equity, right? Because they borrow equity from and of themselves. SpaceX is, without a doubt, I have not heard much criticism, a really, really innovative, super successful, cutting edge company. While Twitter certainly isn't anymore. And there is, I'll come to Tesla in a second, quite some doubt around Tesla too. I'm even wondering whether myth is the right word or whether illusion might be better. I'll give you an example. Not so long ago when I worked in advertising and my client was a German car manufacturer, I happened to one evening watch Jay Leno's Garage, which was a show on, I don't know what, CNBC or so. And he was talking about Elon Musk. And he literally said, I remember this quote because I could not believe that he said that. Jay Leno said on TV, he said, people are going to buy a Tesla because Elon Musk can land a spaceship on the moon.
Yeah, because that's
Period.
advertising.
Period.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's truth. It's truth. This is absolutely true. And
Truth is another interesting word for you to throw in, and allow me to ask you a question about illusion, because I think that's an important idea for us to explore. The science, the contrast between science and myth, and it's not an either or, because it's a both, right? Is that they're both forms of storytelling. So what is illusion coupled with? And I think the gut response would be reality. But I don't think that's appropriate here, because part of what makes this also complicated is the fluidity of reality, right? The fact that we live in a world where virtual reality is not a crazy idea, and competing realities are a very a dynamic part of our politics. So what is the coupling of illusion? Is it substance? Is it a brick and mortar? Because I think you're right. I think illusion is very much part of the process. But go ahead.
I think it is reality, and it's really funny that you bring this up here, because prior to our conversation, when I thought, what am I going to talk about, I took one note down here, and the note literally reads, repeating hideous point of views often enough until they become perceived truth, which is another parallel.
But I wouldn't use the word perceived. They become truth, right?
Yes,
and that's why
true.
when you were, I've been more and more trying to be mindful of how I use these words to kind of catch my own biases. But so to come back to this word reality, because I want to play with it a little further. Yesterday, as I mentioned earlier, I did this gig where I talked about ecopunks, and I shared, and I have this paragraph now in my intro that sort of describes ecopunks as helping people navigate divergent realities, or helping people navigate turbulent realities. And I think that is a huge part of it, because I think the nature of illusions means it's very difficult for people to identify what's real. Like, if we live in a society where illusions have now become the majority, that more of what we experience every day is an illusion rather than a reality. If you assume that people spend time scrolling on Instagram and watching YouTube and playing video games and watching, TV shows on streaming platforms, right? We're spending our time every day in illusions, in fictions, in virtual realities. And it's harder and harder and harder to decipher. Like, I watched the latest Indiana Jones movie, and it was, I kind of thought it was not just, what used to be a movie made into a video game. This was a video game made into a movie. Like, the AI involved in this film was unbelievable. I watched the full credits, and the VFX artist was page after page after page of names in paragraph format. And this is where I think, to your point, people's a struggle to decipher what is real, when we have leaders like Musk, who their success is based entirely on their mastery of illusion, right? On their employment of myth, and the way in which people cannot decipher that they are illusions or myth. They really believe that this guy is the titan of industry and the brilliant human who will carry us to Mars, when all the fossil fuels we've used to, build our society causes this planet to perish.
I'll give you an example here, right? For the last 2 or 3 years, if not longer, Musk's crusade on Twitter was all centered on freedom of speech, which has absolutely no role in this discussion when we talk about a privately held communication platform. But he keeps repeating this again and again and again and again, and still today talks about freedom of speech, and everyone is piping into this, although it has absolutely no point in the entire discussion, right? So this is an entirely fake and artificial argument where there is no need, no grounds to even have one.
Although it does conveniently mythologize freedom of speech, because it takes something which is legal, right, based in constitutional law, and transforms it into something it isn't, right, governing speech on a private platform. But in turning it into a mythology, it robs it of its original meaning. So it sets the ground for what Trump has been promising if he's reelected, which is vengeance against his enemies, right? Which is, you know, a war on journalists, a war on critics.
It mythologizes themselves too, right?
Yes.
The you know, fighters and advocates, the guardian angels of the freedom of speech. By the way, I heard today that Trump has apparently also said a car in the house for everyone. I'm for this. If I could vote,
But come on, my German friend, isn't that National Socialism? Right? All the spoils for us and death and destruction to everyone else.
You're right, and he never said that. Probably,
yeah.
He now will say, you know, that you confront him with this. He never said that, Jesse.
No, he would accuse me of being the National Socialist, and he's just pursuing the American dream. Right?
True.
You know,
true.
that is the twist, and that is the beauty of their dance. That it is always everyone else. It is never I. Right? It's the advertisers who are responsible for tanking Twitter and turning it into the monstrosity that is X. Not me, Mr. Musk.
Yeah, and it's amazing that you know, we're talking about a South African being so you know, constitution here.
Oh, he's not though, right? He's that's the paradox. He's very much pro apartheid. But I think, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, now the question is, you know, what is going to happen with all of this, right? Or what is anyone going to do about this? So my hypothesis is negative in the sense that you know, what this whole performance means might be a further loss of manners, virtue, and good conduct in society and the world. Because if the richest man in the world can openly on stage in front of millions, if not billions of people say someone should go fuck themselves, then why would anyone who is in adolescence, you know, care for doing any better than this, right? And the other thing is, what is going to happen to, you know, the quote unquote business empire resulting out of all of this?
So I think those are excellent points, and I agree. I think, you know, the pandemic of rudeness was already underway, but Elon Musk's full lean into it will accelerate it even further. I do very much agree with that, although I don't see that entirely as a negative. I think that there are positives that come from that chaos. That, you know, the phrase I used yesterday was, we need a new framework for respect. And, you know, this framework for respect, you know, it is something that will be born out of this chaos. I very much believe. But to your point about his business empire, what if, and here I want to set up our one of our salons coming up in the next few weeks. You know, what if his interest in his business empire is being shifted into an interest in a political empire? And that political empire does not have to involve him being in political office, because political office comes with a lot of vulnerabilities, as Mr. Trump is sorely now understanding via his legal trials and tribulations. But I also, to your point, you know, you've had, I think, a very reasonable, logical cynicism as to whether people will respond to these clowns. And I do think that X is witnessing a demographic shift, a shift in its constituency, because I know a lot of people, and I don't just mean friends, I mean visible celebrities and experts and intellectuals who are and actively leaving X. And I think that is quite significant, in the sense that I think we are seeing a loss of power, a loss of influence, where X is just not going to be able to do what it used to. And maybe that's why Elon Musk's performance at DealBook was what it was. Maybe he sees the writing on the wall. Maybe he knows it's going to fail, and he's already creating the myth of failure by trying to blame other people for its demise. But I think 2024 is going to be a year of conflict, to bring it back to your point of rudeness. And I think it's going to be a conflict that, Trump and Musk are going to be leading on the one hand, but I think what we're seeing in the mass movements against the bombings in Gaza is also a kind of populist movement that could resist, the kind of far right, the far right tendencies that we're starting to see across society.
I have to say, I mean, I personally almost consider Twitter a write-off by now. I have to say, for the last year, I have not heard one single person say, "Oh, I saw this great thing on Twitter," or "Jan, you should really check this and that out." Right? So I only hear negative things. What I found really interesting is your political reference here. Because when you think of ecosystems and networks, right, he's got Starlink already heavily involved in the war in Ukraine. Then he's flying to see President Netanyahu on a whim, right, when the whole world is watching. I find this is a really, really interesting point. What makes me wonder is how long is he going to maintain his supporters? Because when he acquired Twitter, he collected money. It was not all his own money, right? He had influential friends who had, billions and chipped in billions for him to purchase this. But, none of them will be happy to have lost $500 million in this, right?
I don't know about that. And here's, I think you're making a totally valid point, but I think you're also making the inverse argument at the same time. Elon Musk is very well connected, right? One of the biggest backers of his Twitter acquisition was the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, right? Another one of his major backers is Larry Ellison, right? The CEO and founder of Oracle.
I knew that, yeah.
And I think to these people, 500 million or whatever is nothing. I think $1 billion to these people is nothing. I think Elon Musk, to your point about Netanyahu, Elon Musk is playing a geopolitical game that we are only getting whispers of because he has access to Xi Jinping, right? He has access to, MBS in Saudi Arabia. He has access to some of the most powerful people in the world. And maybe he knows something that, the mainstream doesn't, when it comes to what is on the horizon politically, economically. And I kind of feel that this is sort of a good point for us to wrap up. And I'll give you a moment to share any final thoughts. But I feel that this is a good setup for our salon on the rise of the far right. That as we, head into the end of 2023 and 2024, I think part of what we'll do here at EchoPunks is the usual kind of, assessing the trends, kind of ripping apart other people's predictions and trying to understand kind of what's coming. Because I think, the insight I got from the client work I did yesterday is, normally, you keep making, I think, a really powerful point about how brands are going to be at the forefront of social change. And that brands are going to be the ones who, when times really get dark, have a profit motive in providing the light. And the people I was with yesterday understood that implicitly, right? And really recognized the commercial opportunity of doing the right thing. And that partly involves understanding the political climate and understanding, how the political climate, especially ahead of time, is shaping the culture, is shaping people's confidence, people's emotions, people's positions. And that, really makes me think that part of our job here at EchoPunks, from an ecosystem perspective, is to try to understand all of society, right? From the multidisciplinary perspective of you need to have a good sense of the big picture to understand specific details.
Yeah, I find this geopolitical point fascinating, right? The question, what are the news behind the news, right? What what is the real news here. I find this really, really interesting. Again, as I was trying to mentally prepare here for our conversation, I felt at some points, I thought, hey, this was a really, really weird performance. Does that remind me of the Truman Show? And if so, then who is Truman? Am I Truman, or is Elon Musk Truman? Right?
Yeah.
Then I thought, this is absurd and bizarre. Is this the real Hunger Games here? And again, the merging of multiple identities, right? What makes a person think that A, it's a good idea, and B, that they can be entertainer, entrepreneur, politician, and athlete, and artist at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And what does that tell us about our society here? Because I bet you when he came and walked off that stage at Dealbook, he probably asked the first person he ran into, and how was I?
Yeah, 100%.
100%.
And I would even go further. I imagine he's the kind of narcissist that he carries someone along in his entourage, in his team, who that is the person he asks, and that is the person who says, "You killed, man. You killed it. Ignore what they said, man. It was great. You fucking knocked it out of the park." Like, I almost imagine that he has someone like that. And I laughed when you said, the Truman Show reference. But I laughed for two reasons, both because I thought it was hilarious. But then I thought, wait a minute, who's the punk? Is Musk the punk? Or are we the punks? Right? Is he punking us, or are we punking him? And this is where I again, if we were a conspiracy show, we would dig deeper into this. But we're not. So I will just leave it there. You know how many kids this guy has? Like, do you know?
27 from 28 wives or so.
And growing. And like a lot of it is like one of his closest lieutenants. It's one of his surrogate moms who is like been a surrogate for 3 or 4 of his kids. Right. And like, he is someone who very much believes that his genetics are superior and the fate of the human race depends upon him having as many children as possible. So think of it this way. Short of 100% inheritance tax that prevents his kids from getting his empire, he's creating his own corporation to take over him with all these Musks who are going to run wild with all anyway. So maybe it's good that he crashes his empire.
And I, if I may add, some inside information, he is an involved dad insofar that he dropped, he probably does it for more than one kid, but I know for a fact that he dropped one of his kids off at Brown University. It happened in the middle of the night, but he was there to drop the kid off, right? Yes, not at normal hours like other people, but he was there.
But you may say it was a fact, and I'm sure it is, but it's part of the myth now.
Exactly. And who knows who was inside that car, right?
Yes. Yeah. And of course, the myth of the Ecopunks lives on. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please rate it on your favorite Google Maps A&W location, or anywhere else you could find an opportunity to rate the Ecopunks. We'll be back, hopefully within a few days, to talk about maybe the death of advertising or other hot topics that are currently creating chatter amongst the Ecopunks network, or at least that's what my friends at the Five Eyes tell me. So thanks, Jan. And
thank you, Jesse. That was fun.
Yeah, we'll talk to you guys soon.